No general in history casts a longer shadow of strategic brilliance and audacious defiance than Hannibal Barca. His name echoes through military academies, a byword for tactical genius, a phantom menace who brought the mightiest empire of the ancient world to its knees and almost extinguished its very flame. We remember him as the man who crossed the impossible Alps with elephants, who orchestrated the perfect battle at Cannae, who held Rome in a death grip for 15 agonizing years. He is the ultimate underdog, the outsider who dared to challenge the inevitable, a figure so singular that centuries later military minds from Napoleon to Patton would study his campaigns with an almost reverent awe. This popular image, while accurate in its broad strokes of genius, often obscures the man behind the myth. It flaunts the complexities of his youth, the burning crucible of his early life, and the singular transformative event that forged him into Rome's most terrifying adversary. We see the legend, but rarely the making of it. He is a testament to unwavering resolve against overwhelming odds, a human meteor launched at the heart of an empire. But what set him on that trajectory? What kind of crucible shaped a spirit so unyielding, so utterly consumed by a singular, destructive purpose? To understand Hannibal, we must first understand Carthage, his birthplace. Not the Carthage of booming trade and naval supremacy that had once dominated the Mediterranean, but a Carthage bruised and humbled, still smarting from its devastating defeat in the First Punic War. This was a city clinging to its wealth, nursing a deep, festering wound of national pride. Rome had stripped it of Sicily, Sardinia, and an immense indemnity, crippling its power and ambition. Into this atmosphere of simmering resentment and quiet desperation, a young Hannibal was born. His upbringing, while privileged in material terms as the son of Hannibal Barca, one of Carthage's greatest generals, was far from sheltered from the shadows of war. Instead, it was steeped in them. He breathed the air of Carthaginian grievance, heard the hushed whispers of Roman treachery, and saw the grim determination in his father's eyes. Hamilcar, a man of iron will and strategic brilliance himself, had salvaged some pride for Carthage in the closing years of the First Punic War, defending Sicily until he couldn't. Yet Hamilcar, a man of iron will and strategic brilliance himself, had salvaged some pride for Carthage in the closing years of the First Punic War, defending Sicily until he couldn't. It was this inability, this forced retreat, this treaty born of exhaustion rather than defeat, that poisoned the air Hannibal breathed. He wasn't sheltered from the harsh realities of warfare in some idyllic childhood garden, but rather sheltered into them, cocooned by the pervasive grievance of a proud nation humiliated. His early years were a stark education in Carthaginian resilience and Roman perfidy. He walked not through sun-drenched courtyards of leisure, but across dusty parade grounds, his small hand often held by his father as they observed legionaries drilling, their movements precise, their weaponry gleaming. He learned the rhythm of the soldier's life, the clang of bronze, the scent of sweat and leather, the quiet determination in the eyes of men who knew both victory and bitter defeat. His playmates weren't other noble children engaged in trivial games, but often the sons of officers or even the soldiers themselves who taught him how to handle a sling, to ride a horse, to understand the topography of a battlefield through vivid, often brutal, stories. He absorbed the history of the First Punic War not from dry scrolls, but from the raw emotional accounts of veterans, their voices thick with a mixture of sorrow and burning resentment. He saw the missing limbs, the scarred faces, the deep-seated anger that simmered just beneath the surface of Carthaginian society. This wasn't just a military education, it was a psychological immersion into a national trauma, a wound that refused to heal. Carthage, a maritime empire of merchants and sailors, had been forced to fight on land against the nascent colossus of Rome, and had lost not just territory but pride, immense indemnities, and its very sense of invincibility. It was a scar that ran through the heart of every influential Carthaginian family, none more so than the Barcas. The definitive moment, the true crucible of Hannibal's fate, came when he was just 9 years old. Carthage had endured the mercenary war, a brutal internal conflict that further weakened its coffers and spirit, yet solidified Hamilcar's position as its most indispensable general. Now Hamilcar prepared to sail for Hispania, to carve out a new Carthaginian empire, a land base from which to confront Rome once more. As the ships were being readied, Hannibal, a boy burning with ambition and a fierce loyalty to his father, begged to accompany him. Hamilcar, a man of deep piety despite his ruthless pragmatism, led his son to the altar of Baal-Hamon, the chief god of Carthage, a deity associated with fertility in the heavens, often depicted with ram's horns. Before the smoking incense and the flickering lamplight, Hamilcar performed the sacred rites. With his hand placed firmly on his young son's head and Hannibal's own small hand resting on the sacrificial animal, Hamilcar made him swear an oath. Not an oath of loyalty to father or city, but an eternal, unyielding vow, never to be a friend of Rome, never. This act, witnessed by few but echoing through history, was more than a father's demand. It was a profound, almost primal transfer of destiny. It was as if Hamilcar, sensing his own mortality and the limitations of his time, had poured his entire life's ambition, his unquenchable hatred for Rome, into his young son's soul. From that moment, Hannibal's path was forged not by his own nascent desires, but by an ancestral imperative, a sacred obligation that transcended mere human will. In the mythological traditions of many cultures, such a solemn oath, particularly one made before a deity and at a tender age, seals a hero's fate. It mirrors the story of Achilles, whose fate was sealed by a prophecy at birth, or the legendary pacts made with chthonic deities that bind one to an inescapable destiny. Hannibal's oath to Balhammon wasn't merely a promise. It was akin to a hero's initiation, a mythological binding to a singular purpose. He became the living embodiment of Carthage's vengeance, a human weapon forged in the fires of national humiliation and paternal ambition. The gods, it was believed, now watched over his every step, ensuring the fulfillment of this sacred, terrible vow. Yet the rational, symbolic explanation for this event strips away the divine intervention and reveals the profound psychological and political engineering at play. Hamilcar, a master strategist not just on the battlefield but in the arena of human will, understood the power of ritual and the indelible mark it leaves on a young, impressionable mind. This wasn't a spontaneous act of piety, but a calculated move to indoctrinate his son, to imbue him with an unwavering, almost fanatical resolve against Carthage's greatest enemy. The never to be a friend of Rome was not just a negative injunction, it was a positive command to forever view Rome as the enemy, the obstacle to Carthaginian revival, the ultimate target of all his energies. The oath effectively removed any ambiguity or potential for compromise from Hannibal's future. It wasn't about personal glory or mere military success. It was about the fulfillment of a sacred generational mission. This deliberate act of psychological imprinting ensured that Hannibal would not merely fight Rome, but would live to destroy Rome. It transformed a 9-year-old boy into a vessel for his nation's grievances and his father's unfinished war. The weight of Carthage's future, the legacy of its past, and the burning ambition of the Barcid family were all laid upon his young shoulders in that singular moment. He was no longer just Hamilcar's son, he was the living embodiment of Carthaginian defiance. For the next 8 years, Hannibal served his father in Hispania, learning the art of war firsthand. He moved from observer to participant, from student to rising commander. He learned the terrain, the local politics, the strengths and weaknesses of different fighting styles. He honed his horsemanship to perfection, developed an intimate understanding of logistics, and cultivated an almost uncanny ability to read a battlefield. When Hamilcar died in battle, likely drowned during a siege, his son-in-law Hasdrubal the Fair took command. Hannibal, still only 18, continued his apprenticeship, proving himself indispensable, earning the respect and loyalty of the troops. He was the first to charge, the last to retreat, enduring the same hardships as his men, sharing their meals, sleeping beside them on the cold ground. He spoke their languages, understood their fears, and commanded their admiration. When Hasdrubal was assassinated in 221 BCE, the Carthaginian army in Hispania without hesitation acclaimed Hannibal as their new commander. He was just 26 years old. This was the true turning point, the moment of personal breakthrough. He didn't merely inherit his father's war, he now owned it. The oath, once a paternal decree, became his own fervent conviction. The grievance, once a shared national trauma, became his personal crusade. He had been molded by his upbringing, bound by a sacred vow, and refined by years of military service. Now he was ready to lead. His first act was not one of consolidation or peace, but of deliberate provocation. He set his sights on Saguntum, a Roman ally in Hispania, knowing full well that an attack would ignite the dormant hostilities between Carthage and Rome. It was a calculated gamble, a direct challenge to Roman authority, and a clear signal that the Barcid war against Rome, interrupted by treaties and assassinations, was now Hannibal's to prosecute. He had stepped out of his father's shadow, not by rejecting the oath, but by embracing it utterly, transforming it from a sacred burden into a singular, unwavering purpose. The boy who swore an oath before Balhammon was now a general, ready to unleash the full force of Carthage's vengeance upon the eternal enemy. His transformation was complete. His destiny, self-chosen and unshakable, was to march on Rome.